Ovo su Ideje HR, ja sam Domagoj Nokmet, a danas smo u Briselu, u Europskom parlamentu, razgovaramo o sudbini Europe u vrlo dramatičnim međunarodnim okolnostima. Naš gost je francuski zastupnik Sandro Gozi.
If we do not exist as Europe, the decision will be taken in Moscow, Beijing and Washington. If my friend Plenković doesn't want to follow, be free, not follow, but do not use and do not support rules which mean the paralizi of the union. EPP is committing collective suicide under the so-called leadership of Manfred Weber. Every 4 years, we pray that the American voters will make the right choice in electing their president.
Sandro Gozi je talijanski i francuski političar, čovjek koji je radio u dvijema talijanskim vladama, a sada je zastupnik Francuske u Europskom parlamentu, dolazi iz pokreta francuskog predsjednika Macrona i djeluje u okviru grupacije Renew Europe. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
We are in quite dramatic situation in the world in general. Do you think that Europe is ready for what's going on?
No, Europe is not fit for the purpose because Europe has was conceived to develop a project in the long run, building up a single market, building up a common currency, developing a project like agriculture, regional cohesion in the long run, and is not equipped to react to the crisis, and is not equipped to react in situation where power, not only but very often now military power, is required. So certainly Europe is still an excellent choice for all the Europeans for prosperity, for growth, for peace, for coexistence. But if we want Europe, and I want Europe to be a real political actor on the international scene, it is clear that the European Union must be reformed.
How?
But certainly we cannot be prisoner of the veto, we cannot be blackmailed by the veto of Viktor Orban or Robert Fico. It is clear that unanimity can remain for the fundamental decision. For example, when we decide to enlarge, we need to all agree the fact that we welcome a new member. But when it comes to sanctions against Russia, when it comes to a fast decision on defense, on military, we have to decide by majority, or we have to let the willing countries to move ahead without obliging those who are more reluctant to follow, but without accepting to be blocked. It is a Europe of free political will around the core of willing countries, countries which are ready to take on responsibility on public investment at European level, defense, military operation. And it is clear that to continue to insist on unanimity means to deny the existence of Europe. If we do not exist as Europe, the decision will be taken in Moscow, Beijing and Washington.
But we saw with Orban and this loan for Ukraine that even the Europe of several circles can be blocked because Hungary was not joining this loan, but is still blocking it right now.
It's blocking because it's playing with the rules in a fair way. Unanimity is required to modify the budget, and it was a deal which we took in December, that as we decided to provide the loan to Ukraine through enhanced cooperation among the willing countries, to say it simple, Orban wouldn't have blocked the use of the budget. But he's playing with rules. He's playing with rules because he's got a national electoral campaign where he plays all his cards against Europe and in favor of Russia. But this is the reason why we cannot continue with unanimity. I do not understand why Croatia, why your government, why your president, we are so keen in keeping unanimity. If we continue to paralyze the Union as we paralyze the Union today, the decision won't be taken by unanimity in Brussels. It will be taken, I repeat, in Washington, in Moscow and Beijing, and imposed to the Europeans. So if Croatia doesn't want to join certain project, be it, but that Croatia should let those who have founded the Union and those who are willing to move ahead If Croatia, if my friend Plenković doesn't want to follow, be free, not follow, but do not use and do not support rules which mean the paralysis of the Union. It is a major mistake.
We spoke before these last European elections, in this last period of term of Parliament, which finished last year, and you, France, you personally, Renew Europe you were front runners of promoting reform. The situation in the world was much better than it is today. It failed that time. Do you think that there is any real chance for serious reform of European Union in these conditions right now, or we will have to play, let's say, between the rules to adjust the inner circles of European Union?
Well, I mean, the position now of the European Parliament is not the position of Sandro Gozi of Renew anymore. The European Parliament last October has adopted a report on the institutional consequences of enlargement, where we as an institution, we are very clear. We need a more powerful, more efficient and more democratic European Union, especially in view of the continental unification of enlargement. And I want to enlarge notably to the Western Balkans, to Southeastern Europe. And to do so, we must use in a more strategic way all the flexibility that exists today in the European Union, that is enshrined in the treaties. There are possibilities for a group of countries to move ahead in common policy, to move ahead in foreign policy. There is what we call the strategic cooperation in defense. Until now, we have used this clause only at the last resort and only for specific projects. Our position as European Parliament is that we have to use now those clauses in a strategic way. We must organize a Europe where the willing countries can move ahead without obliging those who do not want to follow to do so. And it is clear, however, that certain treaty revisions are absolutely necessary. After the last enlargement of 2004, Europe has imported a serious problem with the rule of law. After all, I mean, Hungary is a problem of rule of law that we have imported with the enlargement of 2004. We cannot be naive. In the future, we can have the same problem with new member states. And so, at least the way we prevent and sanction serious violation of rule of law, it is not efficient today and must modify the treaty. Then there are other specific reforms. What we plead as European Parliament, flexibility and targeted treaty reform to make the Union fit for the purpose, which is unification of the continent and playing a role as global player.
Is it possible to be done in this term of the European Parliament?
It absolutely must be done because we are moving ahead with enlargement, and I think that the reform process and the enlarged process must move in parallel.
And do you think that we will see enlargement before next European elections?
I think we can see enlargement before the European elections, but those who are push for enlargement, and I'm in favor, must be taken into account that the next enlargement, as the previous one, must be approved by 54 at least national parliament chambers. In some countries there could be a referendum, and enlargement will be rejected in some countries if it's not accompanied by reform of the governance, of agricultural policy, or cohesion policy, of the budget. So the enlargement friends must become also friends of reform.
Also,
and this is a message for Croatia.
I understand it that way, for Croatian politicians.
For Croatian government.
On the other side, from Western Balkan, we have the issue of Ukraine and European Union. There are extra questions considering the size of Ukraine, the size of their agriculture. What do you think about this idea of alternative path for Ukraine?
Well, I mean, I think that it is absolutely necessary that Ukraine become a member of the European Union. I think that is going to be one point of the possible peace. It is clear that Ukraine as such and cannot become a full member of the Union today because there are too many imbalances. But we can, there again, I think we have to do two things. On one side, reform the Union because the Union must be fit to welcome Ukraine. On the other side, to use, as we have done in the past, long transition period. A long transition period in certain key sectors. For example, agriculture is certainly a very sensitive sector. Ukraine has got a strong agricultural capacity. I'm sure that once the war is over, Ukraine will recover very easily its export to the rest of the world of the agricultural product. So, I mean, if you could imagine that among this reform there is also a long transition period on a key policy like agriculture, I think that the accession is possible. But I repeat, without reform, we won't go anywhere.
Considering reforms, France has extra offers for the rest of the Europe. One of topics which is very interesting for France is the Made in Europe approach. What how do you understand this Made in Europe philosophy?
It is an industrial policy choice. It is clear that we have to strengthen our production capacity, especially in a key sector. Take, for example, steel, take the batteries, take the net zero product. There are sectors on which we have to reduce our dependency from the rest of the world, on which we have to increase European production, on which we have to create new jobs. And the Made in Europe is a way of favoring the European production, favoring the European creation of jobs in this key sector, reducing our dependency. And this is also a way of being less naive in our trade relationship with other parts of the world. For example, it is clear that for the public procurement, especially in key sector, we have to use the reciprocity. Today, we have opened our market through trade agreement to third countries. We have opened our public procurement, but if we go to those countries, the public procurement are not as open as in Europe. It is clear that this is a form of naivete that we have to rebalance using the reciprocity clause. And I think that to create a real level playing field at international level and to better not being protectionist but protect our interests must go hand in hand with the dismantling of the still existing barriers within the single market. There are too many national barriers on telecom, on capital market union, on energy. So on one side, we have to rebalance our relation with the rest of the world. On the other side, we have to eliminate the national barriers. Because when we talk about European tariff, inside tariff, domestic tariff, they are not European, they are national. They are all the obstacles that the national government still keep and that prevent the creation of a market, a digital market, European digital market, European telecom market, etc.
But on that topic, you will probably agree there is a totally different position between big countries, strong industrial countries, and the smallest countries in Europe. Smallest countries are, at least from our perspective, journalist perspective, a little bit afraid of this totally free market inside the European Union. Do you think that?
I don't know. I don't know if it is a division between big and small, but it is clear that
efficient and not so efficient.
So far, the single market has been a great success for everybody. Has increased our prosperity, has created jobs, has made of Europe the first market in the world. And we have done so because we managed to remove the obstacle to free movement of goods, of people, of capitals. But today, we need also to be more efficient on the telecommunication sector, more efficient on digital artificial intelligence. It is clear that we need a real union of saving and investment because today, as a big investor or a small saver like us, is advised by his bank to invest in projects on the New York Stock Exchange because we don't have a real European stock exchange, let me say so. And this is part of the lack of investment, financial support to innovation, to artificial intelligence in Europe compared to the United States of America or China. These are things that we absolutely must address now.
On the other side, we have Donald Trump, who is promoting tariffs and actually barriers as a weapon for United States. And you have the rest of the world, which is trying to extra integrate to preserve free market or some level of free market. In that perspective, European Union is negotiating with Australia, negotiating with Mercosur countries. Do you think that approach is good? France is not very happy with Mercosur.
No, because we think that Mercosur is an old generation agreement which is in balance, which doesn't give the guarantee in some sensitive sectors, especially, agriculture sector, beef sector, and because the farmers, not only in France but around Europe, do not understand why they cannot choose certain product to increase their production, and we import product which use it. So it is clear that now, we have to see with the clauses how we can minimize the negative impact. But really, Mercosur was an agreement we started to negotiate 25 years ago, and it's pretty old. It is clear that it brings benefit. It brings benefit to industry. I think that also there are winners. For example, French industry, Italian industry, European industry are going to win with the Mercosur. But I also think that the real impact in terms of economic impact of Mercosur is not as big as we say. It is more a geopolitical choice than an economic choice. Then, there are other more recent agreements which are much more balanced, which include environmental clauses, which include social clauses, like the Canada one, and now Australia, and before Australia, New Zealand. I think that these are very good, and a big trade agreement we have with the United Kingdom, which has left the European Union but wanted to negotiate and sign a trade agreement with us. We have to continue because we have to diversify our trade structure, and we cannot rely neither on the United States of America nor on China because they are not reliable partners. They are indispensable interlocutors, but not reliable partners.
Independence not only considering economy, but also independence considering safety. That is also something what France Renew Group promote. France is one of the key players here because of nuclear power. It has. How do you see the future military independence of the European Union, if I can say it like that?
But I think that we have absolutely to move ahead among willing countries in building up a core of European defense. It is absolutely necessary that especially the countries which have the most important armies, the most important European industry, start to work much more together, develop common defense industry project, common defense industry production. We have this program SAFE, which is there to favor this. Certainly the key players are, first of all, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Sweden, Poland. But we really have to accelerate the cooperation and the integration, the interoperability, as we say, of what we do in military terms and in defense industry. And this is absolutely necessary. This, group of EU countries can open and should open the cooperation to key actors like the United Kingdom, Norway, and by the way, the European Treaty allows a group of countries to better structure their cooperation in defense while opening to non-European member states. So it is possible and we should do it. And it is clear that this should become a more efficient and more autonomous European pillar of NATO, because it is clear that we want to strengthen also NATO, but we don't want to depend for our security on the choice of European voters, of American voters every 4 years, because every 4 years we pray that the American voters will make the right choice in electing their president, because from their choice depends our security. And the absurdity is even bigger because they choose on domestic issues and not thinking of international politics. So we have to take on responsibility. And from this perspective, the proposal of President Macron to put at the disposal of a new European strategy the nuclear deterrence, it is certainly a very brave, much longer awaited step, and I think we should work around that.
You said European pillar of NATO, but is this also the process of preparing for non-functioning NATO maybe in the future?
I don't know, I hope not, but certainly I know that if NATO would not function in the future, it's because the US would not want it to function, and we cannot take this risk. Exactly for this, we need to increase our autonomy, while putting our autonomy at the service of NATO, in the sense that we want to take on more responsibilities within the transatlantic alliance. But if this alliance is not considered as important and as useful by the founder and the key actor, which are the United States of America, we have to ensure our security and the protection of our territories otherwise.
You mentioned willing countries several times, but those willing countries are not always on the same position. In Croatia, very often politicians say that the direction of European Union is defined between Berlin and Paris, but Paris and Berlin are not in the full harmony right now.
No, I mean, historically it is clear that the understanding between France and Germany is very important. It's a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient. It is clear that we always build a strategy open to all the government and countries which wishes to participate. And the more the understanding, the more Berlin and Paris understand each other, the better. I think that Germans leaders lost two important opportunities, because when Emmanuel Macron was elected in 2017, he was a young, fresh leader with 5-10 years ahead of him, with very good ideas for Europe. And the answer of Germany at the time, Angela Merkel, was very slow. She answered 8 months later, and not enough. Also Olaf Scholz was very disappointing in European terms. I think that Friedrich Merz must understand that he should fully use the last year of the Macron presidency to move ahead on Europe, instead of giving space and visibility to Giorgia Meloni and to allow her to say that there is a new axis between Rome and Berlin. The axis with Rome and Berlin hasn't brought a lot of luck in European history. But I mean, apart from that, I think that it is ridiculous to think that there are a couple that can replace other couple, because a couple is not enough. We need a group of countries, and I think that Italy, Germany, France must work much more together without trying to do stupid competition among each other.
You are very interesting and very European figure. You're Italian politician. You are French politician. You're a European politician. You were a Spitzencandidate for Renew Europe. How do you see the atmosphere in European Parliament right now in this term, especially with EPP, I would say, playing games sometimes with right-wing populists?
It is
considering general needs for the Europe you mentioned already in this interview.
It is very concerning. The EPP is making a fundamental mistake. This parliament certainly is much more difficult than the previous one. But the EPP had committed to work on a pro-European agenda with us, with the Social Democrats, when we elected Ursula von der Leyen and we approved the Commission. And in fact, he's played a double game. Sometimes he pretends he's still a part of pro-European coalition. Some other times he joined forces with the extreme right.
How dangerous it is, and should liberals and the Social Democrats maybe turn back to
EPP? It is
EPP?
a suicide for them. EPP is committing collective suicide under the so-called leadership of Manfred Weber. Manfred Weber has spent 2 years going to Rome. I think he's been in Rome 10 or 12 times, trying to persuade Giorgia Meloni to join EPP. Giorgia Meloni will never join EPP. She's the leader of ECR, why she should join the EPP? But that's what Manfred Weber has in mind. He pretends he wants to open only to ECR, which is already bad enough. But no, he's working also with Patriot, he's working also with the sovereignist. Manfred Weber is working with Alternative für Deutschland, the extreme right Germany. They managed to approve in a piece of legislation on migration discussing behind the scene with the extreme right of the Sovereign Alternative für Deutschland. And Friedrich Merz was obliged to take his distance from Manfred Weber on this. This is a major mistake that the European People's Party is committing. If they continue to do so, they will end like the Forza Italia in Italy and like the Republican in France. They will become the junior partner of the extreme right. They will be the junior partner of people like Meloni or Marine Le Pen. That was happening in Italy. Forza Italia had 36%. Meloni had 4%. Today, Meloni has 28%. Forza Italia is 6%. The Republicans, the Gaullists, were the big force on the right. Today, they are struggling. And you got Le Pen, Bardella, with more than 30%. This is what is going to happen to the EPP if they do not start, if they do not stop to run after the extreme right. Because the voters are not stupid. If you think that the extreme right has got such a bright idea that you want those ideas to become yours, the voter will choose the original, not the copy.
Considering that, considering the need for reform, considering situation in Russia, United States, are you afraid for European Union?
I'm very concerned because the European Union can make it. It is indispensable. It is our future, our destiny depend from the choice we do as Europeans, but certainly must be much faster to act, react and reform itself.
Mr. Gozi, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hvala i vama, dragi gledatelji, dragi slušatelji. Bile su ovo Ideje HR iz Brisela.